During and following the Second World War, the United States needed platforms to experiment with new weaponry and technologies. Consequently, these platforms needed to be large and mobile. Thankfully, they had elderly battleships that were perfectly suited for such roles. The first experimental ship was USS Wyoming, which was used in this role until the fall of 1947, when a lot of her equipment and crew were transferred to USS Mississippi, where she took over this role until the late 1950s. In today's video, we'll cover what these battleships did during their experimental ship roles. Our story with Wyoming starts following her demilitarization following the First London Naval Treaty, where she had guns, armor, and machinery stripped out by the treaty. This demilitarization was finished in June of 1931, and she commenced training cruises around European waters. During this cruise in July, she was redesignated AG-17, a miscellaneous auxiliary, where over the next 4 years and beyond, Wyoming continued her summer cruises for Naval Academy midshipmen and training cruises for sailors of other universities. During the late 1930s, she participated in several amphibious exercises, where some thought she might play a future role as a specialized assault ship. In 1940, some thought was put into arming her with more anti-aircraft guns and other smaller caliber weapons to serve in this commando ship role. Others, especially the fleet training staff, wanted the ship to be used as something akin to USS Utah. But most people were in favor of this less radical transformation. By late 1940, as Utah was receiving more radical changes to her armament, Wyoming maintained her main battery guns and the remaining 5-in 51 caliber guns with a few anti-aircraft guns here and there. These being 20mm and 50 caliber machine guns, where on December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and the United States entered the Second World War. Wyoming was a gunnery training ship on the East Coast. She soon became known as the Chesapeake Raider, as she patrolled the area so frequently on her gunnery training cruises and the amount of ammunition she fired. Anyway, by July of 1942, her anti-aircraft guns were being upgraded with the addition of more 20mm guns and 40mm guns, along with the removal of the 50 caliber machine guns. These were further augmented over the next several years with more 20mm guns, 5-in 38 caliber mounts, with those occupying some of the empty barbettes lining the main deck or anywhere they could find room on the ship. The Chesapeake Raider hoped to train thousands of gunners on the various anti-aircraft guns of the fleet, from the 5-in mount to the smaller anti-aircraft guns. The large refit that transformed her further came in January 1944. Seeing how she was an anti-aircraft training ship, she had no need for her remaining 12-in 50 caliber guns, and they were promptly removed, which merely occupied space better devoted to additional anti-aircraft weapons, as well as the surviving 50 caliber machine guns that were still around. These turrets were replaced by twin 5-inch 38 caliber guns and another Mark 37 Director, giving Wyoming a total of 14 5-inch 38 caliber guns at this point, along with 3-inch mounts, 1.1-inch, and other smaller anti-aircraft guns. I think I should note that in a single month, Wyoming trained 133 officers and 1,329 sailors in the art of anti-aircraft gunnery. During the month of November 1944, she fired 3,033 5-inch shells, 849 3-inch shells, 10,076 40mm shells, 32,231 20mm shells, and 66,270 30 caliber rounds, and 360 1.1-inch shells. In total, she trained around 35,000 sailors and anti-aircraft gunnery. The Chesapeake Raider continued to train gunners until June 30th, 1945, when the urgent need for new anti-aircraft measures to counter kamikazes called her to New York for another refit, becoming the flagship of Task Force 69 out of Casco Bay for anti-aircraft research, headed by Admiral Willis Lee, the decorated battleship admiral of USS Washington fame. Unfortunately, Lee suffered a heart attack one day while heading out for experiments and passed away. Wyoming's first duties involved experimental gunnery practice at towed sleds, drone aircraft, and radio-controlled targets. As the largest operating unit of the force, she was the most obvious target for the force. Wyoming continued to serve in Task Force 69, which eventually became the Operational Development Force operating out of Norfolk, which tested all sorts of new equipment, and of course further alterations to her battery and equipment. The most notable change was the removal of her foremost cage mast, now useless since it was for the fire control of the 12-in guns and 5-in 51 caliber guns. On July 11, 1947, Wyoming entered Norfolk Naval Shipyard and was decommissioned on August 1st, with a lot of her material and crew being transferred to USS Mississippi. USS Mississippi was battleship number 41, displacing some 32,000 tons with a top speed of 21 knots and was armed with 12 14-inch guns, while her secondary battery was augmented throughout her career. Mississippi entered service in 1917 and served throughout the interwar period, being modernized in 1931 and throughout the Second World War, not being present at Pearl Harbor during the attack on December 7, 1941, and notably being a part of Admiral Jesse Oldenorf's battle line, helping to destroy a Japanese thrust into Lee. But what we're here to discuss is her career after the war, as she took over duties from Wyoming, becoming a test ship of sorts. Mississippi arrived at the Norfolk Naval Base on November 27, 1945, for a conversion to become an experimental auxiliary ship, something the older Chesapeake raider USS Wyoming had been doing. Still, Mississippi, being newer and having more extensive modernizations, was more suited for this role. And in February 1946, she was reclassified EA-128, an experimental auxiliary, taken from Dr. Norman Ferryman in his book U.S. Battleships, An Illustrated History. Only number 4 turret would be retained. Number 1 would be replaced by twin 6-in 47 dual-purpose turret. Number 2 would be removed, leaving in its place foundation covered by a flat blast-proof structure on which instruments might be mounted. Number 3 would be replaced by a triple rapid-fire 8-in 55 caliber turret of the type later mounted aboard Des Moines-class cruisers. In addition, there would be 2 single and 2 twin 5-in 54 caliber, 4 twin 5-in 38 caliber, 2 twin 3-in 70 caliber, quadruple 40 mm as interim, 2 twin 3-in 50 caliber, 4 quadruple 40 mm, 1 quadruple 20 mm, 4 twin or 2 single, or these secondary weapons were mounted mainly on the O1 level, built out as in Maryland. On the other hand, light guns mounted on the O2 and O3 levels were to be removed, and these levels were reduced to allow for sky arcs for the anti-aircraft batteries. The quadruple Bofors at the break of the Foch would be retained, and the new 20mm battery installed after port. Of these weapons, the twin 5-in 54 caliber never entered service. The single 5-in 54 caliber installed was a semi-automatic type, mounted in the Midway-class carriers, not the automatic weapons that later appeared in many U.S. warships. This included 3-in 70 calibers, which shows the optimism of 1945. This weapon did not enter service for another
11 years. The proposed director installation was ambitious. 1 Mark 54, successor of the wartime Mark 34, 2 Mark 37, 3 Mark 56, and then lighter types, 2 Mark 51, 5 Mark 57, 3 Mark 61, and 3 Mark 63.
3 CICs were to be installed, a destroyer type in the forward superstructure, a battleship, and a cruiser type on the second deck. A big tripod mainmast carried new radar. While in the shipyard, she became flagship for the Operational Development Force and of Battleship/Cruisers Atlantic Fleet, during which time the old crew of Wyoming transferred, carrying a considerable amount of material with them. I should mention, the two ships' timelines do overlap, with Wyoming staying on the list of active ships for a little more time, while Mississippi refitted. Mississippi re-entered service in April 1948 and got to work. She emerged with one remaining 14-inch turret and, surprisingly, two single 5-inch 54 caliber guns, one on the focal deck and one on the O1 level on the port side. Three twin 5-inch 38s, two twin 3-inch guns, and two quad Bofors. By April of the next year, she added a twin 6-inch turret on the number 1 barbette, but she never got a triple 8-inch turret. Meanwhile, the ship was designated to test the new Terrier anti-aircraft missiles. And this is where things start to get really interesting, as she was given two Mark I launchers, which would be installed aft in place of number 3 and number 4 turrets. These weapons were first test-fired off the Virginia Capes in late January 1953, and she was also employed in the testing of the Petrel Air Surface Missile in February 1956. By this time, the buffers were gone. In this photo, you can see Mississippi firing her Terrier missiles in that 1953 test, a great photo illustration of how far the ship had come. Entering service in the age of steel and shot being designed for battles like Jutland the year before her entry into service, to now, as seen in this photo, testing missiles, a fast-moving world of technology. Taken from Dr. Friedman in his book, U.S. Battleships in Illustrated History, the Mississippi was decommissioned on September 17, 1956, having entered Norfolk for deactivation on May 26. She was sold to Bethlehem Steel and towed away for breaking up on December 7, 1956, after a career of nearly 39 years. Another little interesting topic. Conclusion with a video I just threw together, discussing a very odd topic that I don't think many of you know. Anyway, please remember to like and subscribe, as it'll help the channel to grow. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, my friends, have a great week.